I'm here to do a gridding video 2.0. The reason I'm doing this is because I've had a lot of questions and a lot of feedback on my original gridding tutorial, and what I'm going to do today is just kind of go over it in more of a detailed way, since I've had a lot more experience with it, and how I'm going to go about showing you guys how to grid the way that I do it. I'm not saying it's the right way, and I'm not saying that any other way is the wrong way, but it's just the way that I do it, and it makes sense to me. But here is what you will need to grid the way I grid. This is not completely necessary, but I just have a little box here of sewing pins that is helpful with figuring out, oh dear, you'll need a ruler too. Aha, I have one. So yes, you'll also need a ruler, which I have just added. And you need, not necessary but helpful, you have some sewing pins, and I use Silky Sliver, S-L-I-V-E-R, metallic, Silky Sliver there. And I buy this at Joann's. It's about $5 to $6 a spool, but you get 250 yards, and it lasts a very long time. And the good thing about Joann's is that you can use coupons and get it half off, or even better sometimes. So there's that, and I have it in blue and red, and I moved the red to a sewing bobbin. I don't know why, but I did. So I have that there, and I usually tend to go with blue. You could always go for a gold. They have this in tons of colors. They have it in a green, red, blue, black even, so whatever you choose, as long as it's easy for you to use, that's all that I recommend. And you're also going to need your scissors, just standard old cross-stitch scissors, plus your needle. This is a size 28 bowhead needle, so I have that, and of course your ruler. This is just going to be to decide your starting spot. And I'm going to be showing you how to grid on, here's my fabrics that I have, and I will be zooming in on these so they're easier to see. This is a 27 count linen, and I also have a 14 count Aida, and I also have a 25 count Evenweave. So we've just got a good variety of everything. Alright, so here's the Roses of Provence, and you can see how she's gridded. I started, when I actually did start her, I started with her head. And I started at the top and I started working down. So that is how I started with her. And you can see how my grids are done. And actually this is on a linen. But you can see how I've got, they're just not quite touching, and that's because they go underneath the fabric. And I will get into more detail about that. Alright, so here we have the first pattern that I'm going to show you how to even figure out how to decide where to grid. So you're going to need to figure out the size of your pattern first, and this was a free pattern by Daily Cross Stitch. So you can see here, and I always like to triple check my first 10, and I always make sure that there really are 10 squares, because sometimes they psych you out and there's 9. It's just a good habit to get into figuring out the size of your pattern before you begin actual gridding. And I've already counted this one, and it is actually 76. But we can even round that up to 80, or we can keep it at 70. It really just depends on what you're more comfortable with. You can see here the line for 70 goes right about through the middle of this seaweed. So if you'd be more comfortable putting in 76 grid lines, or 80 or 70, it is completely up to you. And on the other direction, it is 79, and we're just gonna make it easy on ourselves and round it up to 80. So it's easy to make notes when you're getting ready to start. Just write down, even on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be techie or anything like that. So you just write down you're gonna do an 80 by, oh, what did we say? We'll just round it up to 80. We'll make it easy. So we'll do an 80 by 80, and that's the size of the pattern That's the Little Mermaid. So we have this pattern first that we're going to do, and I will also show just like a quick on how to start. But here, if you were not counting, or I'm sorry, if you were not gridding, that is your center. So you see you'd have to go up 3 and then start in her arm, but that's not necessary when you grid because you can start anywhere you would like to because you have the ability to start wherever. So how we're going to figure out the size of fabric we need is the very first thing you need to do. So you already know that your pattern is 80 by 80. And I'm going to show you an insanely easy way how to figure out how big of a piece of fabric you need. So you already know that this is going to be 80 stitches, and you already know that you would like to stitch it on, say a 14 count is what we're going to start on first. So you're going to do 80, which is your stitches in one direction, and you're going to divide that by your count of fabric, which is 14. And that gets you 5.7 inches, rounded up to a good 6. It's easier just to round up, I found out. And then, so we're going to take that 6 inches, and because I like to leave 3 inches on each side for border and framing and just easy to get into the Q-snap and what have you, I'm going to add 3 inches on one side and 3 inches on another side, or you could just add 6, which gets me 12 inches. So right now I already know that I need one length of my fabric to be 12 inches, and because it's going to be 80 stitches by 80 stitches, it's a good square. So we need 12 inches of fabric. So all you have to do is when you have your fabric, it's best to make sure that you have a zigzag stitch along the edge, and you can do this by hand or you can do it on a sewing machine, or you can even use fray stop. So what you're going to do is put your measuring tape all the way up to the end here, and then just measure out your fabric. And this is actually a 14.5 size fabric, and that is perfectly fine. It's okay to have extra more than you need, or you can cut this down to size. But just for demonstration, we're going to leave this alone at 14. And this is really long, so I know it's going to be enough the other direction too. Yeah, this is about a 14.5 by 17 piece of fabric. So we have that fabric, and we're just going to go ahead and use it for demonstration. But what we're going to do is take your ruler again, and then if you need to, grab your sewing pins. And you're just going to grab 2. And so then you're going to go on the edge of the top, and you're going to measure over 3. And you can even kind of just eyeball this, but if you don't feel like it, you can put a pin there at the 3-inch mark, just to mark your spot. This isn't where you're going to start gridding. So you already know that your 3 inches from that direction is here, and then 3 inches from this direction is here, and that will be your starting spot for gridding right there. I don't know if that made any sense at all. This was just temporary, and then, or you can have 2 pieces of your ruler. This would actually probably be easier. So you can start it at 20, go to 23, and then you can bring this top one down from 3. And that is where you will start your gridding. And that just makes it really easy to find out where you're going to start and how much to leave yourself. I should show you how to get your sulky sliver ready. And I just kind of take it off of the spool. So it just comes off like so. And you can cut a length however you feel comfortable, but I prefer not to start and stop mine so much just because it takes more time to start and stop. So this is about, it's an arm span. If I was to stick my arm straight out, it would be an arm span on me. So I'll just do that, and I'll just cut this off of there. Alright, so here we're going to start with our knot, and what I do is I find my end, and there's my end there, and I just sort of fold it over on top of itself and make a loop, and here's the ends here, and I will just kind of pinch and roll this, and this gets me a good knot. Well, I have to tie it, but this gets it to where I can get it and just sort of, just sort of loop it on itself and give it a good knot. Alright, so there's my knot, and if you feel like doing two, you can do two by all means. So here's your needle, and you're just going to thread it like so, or you can use a threader. Alright, so now we have our needle threaded. To figure out your starting point, you just kind of, it doesn't have to be exact, but as long as it's around 3 by 3 away from the ends, then you can start here, or you can start here, or there, wherever you would prefer. So you just go on the back side of your fabric. I'm going to push up through here. So here comes my needle with my sulky. And I'm going to pull it through, and what I'm actually going to do is backtrack one stitch and then just sort of weave it through. And this, what I've found, is a very helpful way to secure it, so it doesn't get pulled through, the knot doesn't get pulled through, and you have a very good starting point, and you can see where your thread has been ended and where it has been started. So I do that about 3 or 4 times, and then I go back down, and then I'll take out this pin here because I've already got my starting spot, and then I'll go up maybe 2 or 3 stitches away from that. So see how I'm coming up 2 stitches away from this blue, or this one that I anchored in. So I will just pull this through, and this is going to be the corner. And what I do when I grid is I go over 8 and under 2. So all you have to do is count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I'll put my needle down, and you can pull it through if you would prefer. And then underneath I will count, there's 1, and then there's 2. And I'll bring my needle back up through here on the second one. And I like to do my borders first, just so I can go all the way around and make sure that it will fit on the fabric. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then down. Or what you can do is just sort of sewing it through, and you can just go under your 2 without pulling your needle all the way through to the bottom, which does save time, keeps your thread from tangling. And here's what we're going to do when it comes time to turn a corner on the border. Counting straight lines, you would just simply go 1 and 2. But if you're turning a corner, then you're going to go 1, and then you're going to turn your corner and come up here on 2. Okay, so here we are. You can see I've already counted down my 80. So here's my starting point, and I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And I've turned the corner here, and this will be at the end. This is the bottom of my 80 and the start of my next horizontal. And actually, when you get down here, and because my fabric is much longer than it needs to be, this isn't going to be exact, but when you get down here, what you can do is grab your measuring tape again, and if you feel confident enough, then you should have 3+ inches, if that is what you prefer. If you only like to have 2 inches, then you will only have 2. But because this fabric is 17, of course it's not going to be exact. But when you get down here to the end, where you're supposed to turn your corner for your border, then you can measure and make sure that you really do have enough fabric all the way around. Because now that you have gotten to this point, you can keep on going, and then we will see again if our fabric is going to fit. So I will just keep on going over 8 and under 2. As you can see, I have counted across to my 80. So I have 2 lines now of my border that are done. So I'm going to keep on going with my over 8 and under 2. And what I'm going to do is just keep on going up to where we started, and that is going to be our border. And if you're right here, what you can do while you're here is measure your fabric and make sure that it's going to fit. Alright, so here is our end where the corner is. So we will put the ruler in here and make sure, yes, I have much more than needed, but you're going to need at least 3 if that's how you have figured out your fabric size, is to leave 3 inches on each side. So we're good there, and now we know for sure that our entire project will fit on the fabric. Alright, so here I am. I've come all the way back around and I've made a complete 80 by 80. And I'm just going to count my final 8, and I will show you how these will line up. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And just by doing corners, you will learn that you will have this one square here, this one hole is your turning corner, and you will learn that really quickly, and that's how you will know that your lines have all matched up. You have come all the way around and everything lines up. Hooray! You can move on to the next step. So we're going to bring our needle up here. We're going to do the horizontal lines first. So you can see that you're going to come up and you're going to have one square to the right, and you will see once the squares are finished, you will always have this little 4 square in between everything, and that's how you'll know that you counted right. You can take your needle here, and you know that this is the line that you need to follow here, so you can just kind of run your needle across until you get to where you can see that it lines up with this top. See how you can see that this line here intersects with that line there? So we're going to try that again. We'll go across here, and you can eyeball it and see that that line is the same as this row up here. So these lines will match. See that? So all you need to do is kind of eyeball it and follow along the stitches you have already counted, because right now you won't need to count anymore. So you can just follow your needle on the line straight across, and then as soon as you see the eyeball of where these lines match up from one line to the next, you will not have to count. So you can see that line matches up perfectly with that line, and then I'll just go under 2, and this line matches up here, and we'll just eyeball here. You can even go this direction, as long as you know which line you're aiming for. You can continue doing it this way. If you would prefer to count 8 over 8 under 2, by golly, you go ahead and do it, but this is easy. This is the easy part. Alright, so see how I'm doing this? I just go over 8 and under 2, but I just follow the line of the fabric. And I'm going to keep on going. And this is the very quick part, and there's no counting involved. And the more you do it, the better you will get at eyeballing where these need to go. And if you're uncomfortable doing this, practice. And if you're still not comfortable doing this, then count. There's nothing saying you can't count it. Move my needle down here to this row and come up through here. See how I did that there? And we're just going to keep on going here, down to this line here. And there we have, oops, okay, see what I did here? I didn't go far enough down. And as long as you catch it, you can undo it. If you don't catch it and you keep on going off of the wrong line, your entire grid will be off. So just fix that when you see it. So, I mean, can you see this line goes across here, and this line comes down from here. And that's where your needle goes in every single time. So I'm going to do this and do all my vertical, horizontal lines, and then I will get back to you and I'll show you the next step. Alright, so here you can see I'm sort of at the end of my thread. I don't have enough to go and do one more pass on the grid lines. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be exactly like how we started it. And I'm going to work it to an end of the border, and I'm just going to put it under here, And then we're just going to sort of pull it up past the end of the border. And this is how I finish all of my knots. Whenever I get to the end of a thread that I can't use anymore, I don't just tie it off wherever I am. I have to work it to the end and then do the same thing where I just sort of weave it in and out of one square. And I'll just weave this about 3 or 4 times. And what I'll do is I will put my needle through to the bottom side of the fabric, and I'll pull it through. And then what you do is flip your fabric over. And here you'll see the back side of what you've been doing. And you'll see all these short little dashes, and these are where your under twos are. And these long ones here are where you have turned the corner and have moved on to another row. So that's what those are. But now that I have my knot under here, or my thread under here on the back side, I will unthread my needle, and then just kind of rather loosely, I will just sort of tie a quick knot, and not snugly, but I will pull it through, and then sort of just like pinch it down here to the fabric, and do it like if you were tying a bow on a present. And I'll just pull here, and I'll get a good knot way at the bottom of the fabric. And I know knots are bad in cross stitch, but this is a grid and it will be coming out. So you just do as many knots as you think you need. So because I've already woven it through the front several times, I'll just knot it twice. What you can do now is just trim it here and throw this away. You're not going to need that anymore. And then while you're at it, you might as well just come back here to the front, or to where you had started, and just trim that so it's not in your way. But just make sure you don't cut any of your knots and you don't slip it under any of these that you've already gridded. But here we are, and you can see I've already done about 4 lines, and all I have left to do is these 2. So I will start one thread here, and I will start it exactly like I started this one and did this one. Alright, so I have finished all of my lines here, and you can see that they're all finished. And right now I have my needle underneath my fabric, and that's because I'm going to show you how to make the turn and start to do the filling in lines that go across. So what I'm going to do is just bring my needle up here, just like if I was doing it the other direction. And this is the easiest part because you don't have to count anything. You just aim. And see how I'm making this little block of 4? It sort of sticks out, doesn't it? So this is where your grid lines are going to take place. And even though the corners don't touch, you still get the gist of where your box is. So all we do now is just keep on running our needle through here, and we're just finishing up the gridding. And now we're almost done. This is the home stretch. This is an easy part. And then when it comes time to turn the corner, you just move your, oops, don't get overzealous here. It's exciting, but don't go too fast. And just keep on going. And now when you're coming up to the end, put your needle in one time. And then if you feel like you need to pull it through, go ahead. And then we will just move down here to the next row and put it up through one hole away from the edge of your grid. And then we'll just keep on running it back and forth, and we will do this until the very end. Alright, well there we have it. Our grid is now done, and I just finished off this end like I did with the rest, but here is the top here. So this is how we started. And as you can see, this is a perfect fit for the fabric. I have a lot extra on the sides. And here is the up-close view of what your grid is actually going to look like when you're working on it. And you'll see that there's those 4 little boxes of 4 that I was talking about right there. And that's just going to be your corners. And you will learn to love them. And gridding is actually going to get easier the more it's done. And I hope that this was helpful, and that's just it helps me because that means less counting, and when I screw up, it's only within 3 or 4. I don't screw up huge amounts of numbers anymore. And you can see how shiny it is. It's really easy to see. But when it comes time to come up to your grid lines, what you can do is you can stitch over them. And you can see here the thread does not pierce the gridding line. The needle doesn't pierce it, which means that you can work around it, and when the time comes to pull out the grid lines, they will just slide right out because they haven't been pierced. So you can see here that the stitches are sort of going on top of the grid line. And if you don't like that, if you don't like the way that that works, what you could do then is we're going to move up over here and we're going to avoid the grid line. And when you're going to be avoiding the grid line, it'll just be sort of sitting on top of your stitches. So when you're working, just don't go over the top of it. You will just sort of maybe push it out of the way or something, and then you'll just stick the needle down in through there, and it won't trap the grid line underneath your stitches. So there's that option. You could do that. Sorry, this is so shaky. I'm trying not to wiggle so much, but it's really kind of hard to do this. So yeah, that's how you can stitch above the grid lines or below the grid lines, and I will show you a really up close. Alright, so that's what it looks like. On the left is me stitching above the grid lines, and on the right is stitching without trapping the grid line underneath your floss. So it's totally up to you. It's a preference. I think that doing it this way, where you avoid the grid line, takes a little bit longer, but you can see the grid lines on top of your stitching when you're working, and that is helpful. But until you get used to it, I might suggest that you go ahead and leave the grid lines on top and try to stitch around it. And I'm going to switch on over and show you how to do quickly on linen. And it's basically the exact same thing, just a little bit more tweaking because linen has more strands. Alright, so here are my Roses of Provence. You can see how I've been gridding this one, and it's exactly the same as I've been doing, but this is on linen. And I have stitched over the grid lines, and you can see that they kind of disappear right around here under her dress, but if you have already stitched it, then you don't need the reference anymore unless you absolutely feel like you need it. But you can see here that they are a little bit visible underneath her skin here, but underneath the dress, not really at all visible. But again, this is a preference that can be made by you, and if you prefer to see your grid lines, then just stitch around them and avoid piercing them underneath your X. Alright, now you can see here that when it comes time to stitch the grid lines on linen, you're going to have to think about it a little bit differently than if you were stitching it on Aida. And that's simply because there are more threads on a linen than there are on an Aida. So here is our 10 by 10. Because I'm stitching this one over 2, then I'm going to have to count 20 strands, and that it's actually easier than it sounds, and I will show you really quick what I mean. Alright, so with linen, because it's woven, you're going to see you have the way that it's woven. It comes up over here and under this one, and then over this one and under this one. See how you can follow this thread and just see how it's woven in and out of the horizontal threads. So with linen, you have to anchor the thread down, and I always anchor mine on, this is very technical, on an uppy downy thread. And basically I just always start my X in the bottom left hand corner. Here's my needle, and I will always come up next to, on the left side of an uppy downy thread. I know it makes total sense. And if you're going to go over 2, then that just means you're going to go over 2 strands of thread to make your X. And if you are not comfortable with linen, I suggest practicing, maybe purchasing a test, like a little scrap of linen or Evenweave, and trying it, because you might like it. So we're going to grid exactly the same way like we did on the Aida, but now we're just going to go count 20 of these threads, but you're not going to have to count 20 individuals. What I do is, because my X's have to come up through this one point, this is where my grid line is going to start. So I'll just go and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. So we're not actually counting 16 threads, because you would be counting 2 threads to make your X. I just go and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I think that's the high school musician in me coming out. So to come up under 2, you'll just, here's where we went down. So you're going to go and 1 and 2. And see how you're always going to come up directly left of an uppy downy thread. That is exactly how I grid my linen. So we'll just do it one more quick time. So here we are on our where we came up. I'm only counting uppy downy threads. Alright, so here we go. We're going to count and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. There we go. We will double check that just to be sure, because for some reason it went completely out of focus. Alright, so here we go. We'll count to the right so we don't have to miscount if we miscounted. So we just go and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. So we made it. And the same thing is that when you're coming up, so you just go and 1, and 2. So that is exactly the same counting and technique as when you grid with Aida, except you just have to think a little bit differently, because if you are stitching over 2, that's how you're going to have to think. Okay, so I've done half of an X on linen, and it's going to be directly to the left of a vertical thread that is passing over the top of a horizontal thread. And I didn't get this until I started working on it myself. So every single corner of your X will always go directly next to a thread that goes up and over the top. So here I come up through here, and see how my needle is directly to the left of an uppy down thread. And then I will just put it back through, and then I will have all my X's starting and stopping at the same spot. Okay, so since we switched from linen to Evenweave, I'm actually going to do my Evenweave little quick tutorial over 1, because we've already figured out how to do the linen over 2. Alright, so my first stitch is coming up next to a up and down thread. It's just a habit. And I'm just going to count 8 holes, because I'm going to be doing this over 1. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll go under 2 and come back out. So it is the exact same over 1 as it is when you're working on Evenweave compared to Aida. It's just that it looks a little bit different, and it's a different feel, and it's a different fabric. But it's the exact same thing with counting holes. But if you were to count over 2, it would be the same thing like I showed on linen. Okay, so we've come up through this hole, and it would be and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. And that is how you would do that. And then you just go under and 1 and 2. And that's how you would grid on Evenweave as well as linen. So there's my over 1 and there's my over 2. And it's the same technique, it's the same style as doing it on the Aida. You just count your border first, if that helps. I think it helps me amazingly, because then I know where my fabric is, or where my stitching is going to be on my fabric, and I will know if I have started the wrong direction. Then I'll know that I need to either flop my fabric around, or I need to adjust my size of my pattern, or I need to change my size of fabric. So I hope this gridding tutorial was helpful to everybody. If you have questions, go ahead and comment below, and share this video to those that you think might need help with gridding or just a new technique. And I hope you guys have a great stitching, and any gridding questions at all, go ahead and feel free to ask or private message me, whatever you're more comfortable with. Thank you. Goodbye.